First of all, let me skip all of this. What this is all about, what a background of an entrepreneur is. First of all, I think this is a relevant slide. In the United States, the perception is that you have to be from an elite university to be a successful entrepreneur. Completely false. Having an education makes a big difference. I have a lot of people, even in Chile, asking me if they should do higher education. And what I tell people is that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, at the least get a bachelor's degree. A master's degree is optional. A PhD is not necessary. Unless you want to be a professor, unless you want to get into heavy-duty scientific research, then a PhD makes a lot of sense. In the old days, and I'm sure many of your parents have said this to you as well, that you have to go do higher education and complete all these sophisticated degrees. To be an entrepreneur, you don't. A bachelor's degree is a must-have. Right now, I'm fighting battles in the United States about bachelor's degrees. If you Google Vivek Wadhwa, Peter Thiel, you'll see I've been ripping into one of the richest people in the world, one of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley on education, because he's paying children to drop out of school and saying you don't need to get education. You can drop out of you can complete high school and become an entrepreneur. Completely dead wrong. You need to at the least have a bachelor's degree. Here's the data which shows what I'm talking about. This is the average headcount and revenue of companies founded by entrepreneurs, successful companies founded by entrepreneurs with high school degrees, the average, and elite degrees. Now that average includes both of those. If you think about it, the difference between going to a regular university here in Santiago or in Valparaiso or anywhere else and going to a Harvard is huge. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that you spend on going to Harvard. But you have as much chance of success at graduating from a university here, any second-tier university here, as you do from Harvard as an entrepreneur. This seems surprising, but that's consistent with what you'll find in the backgrounds of successful entrepreneurs, that they don't come from any particular schools. In fact, if you graduate from a Harvard, you're less likely to be an entrepreneur because you'll end up joining an investment bank, Goldman Sachs, and selling your soul and manipulating the financial system. Not good. Entrepreneurs tend to be highly experienced. This group over here is surprisingly young. I expected a lot of older people here. There are a lot of young people over here. But one thing in entrepreneurship is that experience makes a big difference. Learning, working for a company, working for a startup, getting some basic experience in business makes you much more likely to succeed as an entrepreneur. So yes, in Stanford, if you're at Stanford and you drop out and join Y Combinator, you have a higher than likelihood chance of success. But that's just for those people, for the Stanford dropouts. It's not for the rest of the world. The rest of the world needs to get experience. And to the extent that you have worked for big companies, small companies, it doesn't matter. Experience makes a big difference in success. Now, this is another interesting chart, because I've had this conversation with many Chileans who have an inferiority complex about whether Chile can build an innovation system. The number one thing which everyone says is there's no venture capital here. Why do they say that? Because they read TechCrunch and they read American Silicon Valley blogs, and everyone talks about venture capitalists funding companies. But the vast majority of American entrepreneurs do not raise venture capital. And I'm talking about successful entrepreneurs. According to the research I had done, we found that only about 10–11% of successful companies raise venture capital. When I published a study, it created a lot of controversy because as you can understand, I had defied the myth of that the venture capitalists are putting out. The venture capitalists want you to believe that to build an innovation system, you need to have them, that they're essential for innovation. If 9 out of 10 successful companies don't need venture capital, then it dispels their myth. So when I published this paper, it created a lot of controversy. Kaufman Foundation, that had published my paper, did a follow-up research project to try to prove or disprove what I had learned. They looked at the Inc. 500 list, which is a really very select, biased group because it's the most successful companies in America. And guess what? They found that 85% of the companies never raised any venture capital. Right? So if American entrepreneurs can become successful without raising venture capital, why do we worry about Chilean entrepreneurs? It's a myth. The majority of revenue comes from personal savings. friends and family. Begging, borrowing, stealing, whatever it takes. That's what entrepreneurs do. What makes, we asked entrepreneurs what makes them successful. It's always about work experience. Successes, failures. In fact, if we took the people who had never failed out, what we found actually was that failure is more important than success to entrepreneurship. This is in Chile, in Mexico, in Brazil, in India, in China, in North Carolina, in Texas, all over the world, other than Silicon Valley, failure is considered to be a bad thing. If you become a social outcast. I mean, if a child in Chile decides to become an entrepreneur, they fail, their parents want to divorce the child because the child is a failure. And it becomes a social problem, social stigma here. But entrepreneurship is all about experimentation. When you do science projects, did anyone ever tell you that if you're doing a science project, you have a hypothesis and your first experiment fails, that you're a reject, you can't do it again? They teach you the exact opposite. That a science project is all about trying over and over again until you get it right, until you prove or disprove your hypothesis or develop a new hypothesis. That's the same thing with entrepreneurship. You have to do it multiple times before you succeed. So failure is a very important part of success. And that's what the lessons show. So this is something which we need to reprogram the entrepreneurship community here about, is to accept failure, to embrace it, show off about it. That's what we do in Silicon Valley. If you go to Silicon Valley, you meet people, the first thing they'll tell you is about, if you ask them, what do you do? The first thing they tell you is what they're doing. The second thing they tell you is how much they failed. Why do they do this? How much I failed? Because it shows how successful you're going to be in the future. It's like getting a degree. Failure is the best MBA you can have. And the problem is that people here don't want to take risks. They don't want to become entrepreneurs. Big problem. How do you change the culture? How do you now get this place to be innovative and entrepreneurial within 3 years, within 4 years, within 2 years? It's really not possible, because even if they started taking on advertisements on TV, you couldn't tell people that failure is okay. Go ahead and leave school and start a company. You can't do that. So what we decided to do was to do an experiment. I said, let's take advantage of America's problem, that its political system is mired in dirty politics, and they can't make any decisions. So what's happening is that America is experiencing a reverse brain drain. Immigrants are leaving America in record numbers. I said, instead of people going back to India and China or to Brazil, why don't we bring them to Chile? So along with Nico Shea and a bunch of people from Corfu, we quietly did an experiment here, which did not get much press when we did it. And we brought in 25 entrepreneurs from abroad. I wrote an article in TechCrunch about it, and that got us more than 100 applications. And 23 companies showed up, and we started seeing what happened. What would happen if we brought 25 foreigners here? Once they got over all the bureaucratic obstacles, what they found was that these foreigners were now interacting with the local community. They were going to colleges all over Chile, recruiting from there. They were giving classes to the locals on entrepreneurship. They were now beginning to interact with the locals. They were holding weekly events. At first, some of the locals were very, very negative about it. There were a couple of idiots who wrote nasty blog posts condemning Startup Chile, saying we're giving our money away, why do we need all these foreigners? The same sort of problems I have in America when I talk about immigration, that you have these nationalistic people who believe that they can do it all and you don't need foreigners. So you had this backlash over here, but it was small, it was containable. And what started happening was that by the end of that experiment, I think every foreigner had hired 1.8 locals. And they had brought in friends and relatives for tourism. The experiment paid itself off in many times over, so they scaled it up. Now I think by the time we're done, we'll have about 400 companies that have come over here. If you go down 2 blocks from here to the Startup Chile offices, just go and hang out there. It's like a mini Silicon Valley. It really is. You should see the energy that's happening over there. Now, the number one problem is fear of failure. When you have left your home in your country and you've come to another country, you're not afraid of failure. You have nothing to lose, right? That's number one area. The number 2 thing which makes people successful in entrepreneurship is information sharing. This is another thing that doesn't happen here in Chile. That people are afraid of telling each other what they're doing because they're afraid that if they tell someone, they'll steal their idea and they'll run with it. They won't help them. The exact opposite happens. When you tell someone what your idea is, you get feedback from them. You learn about what works and what doesn't work. People share ideas, and what happens every time you share an idea, the knowledge doubles, right? And it spreads. And then you start getting better ideas, because ideas are cheap. What makes a company successful is execution, is being able to turn that idea into invention. So if you go over there, every day they have these what are called tribes. They have 10 tribes which are focused on finance, marketing, selling, Java coding, Python coding, and then they have it by industry, travel and tourism. They have different types of tribes which get together, sometimes once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, but every day there's some activity happening there where entrepreneurs are sharing. Here what happens is that all day people are together. They're exchanging, they watch each other, they learn from each other, they exchange ideas. So you're having a lot of magic happening here. I've been meeting entrepreneurs suggesting they combine efforts, they team up with one another, they shift their business plans. But this is happening dynamically over here. So this experiment so far is a runaway success. What it shows is that the key to innovation is people. Now let's talk about Chile for a second. Another thing I realized is that the innovation coming out of Chile is as good as anywhere in the world. We talk about the grand challenges. One of the themes from Singularity University, from the founder, Peter Diamandis, you should Google his name. He's written a book called Abundance, which is a must-read. Every one of you should get a copy of that book and read it. It summarizes everything we teach in Singularity University, and it tells you what the net result of that is. The net result of that is that in the next 1 or 2 decades, this decade and next decade, we will start solving the grand problems of humanity. Right now there's shortages of energy, water, food, there are problems with health. We don't educate people. All of these grand challenges can be solved. Water is a typical example. Right now, there are movies being made about the upcoming water wars, because the belief is that we'll run out of water and people will start killing each other because there isn't enough clean water. Well, in this room we have Alfredo. He's going to be talking after me. I was absolutely blown away when I saw what he's doing yesterday. Now, how did Alfredo develop his solution? Well, there's a group here called TECHO. Julian over here happened to come to Singularity University, a year or 2 ago? 2 years ago. And he basically got infected with the Singularity virus, which means that he started thinking about changing the world. He believed nothing can stop him. And his ambitions were outsized, bigger than Chile. So he came over here, he teamed up with Javier and the rest of the TECHO team. And what they're trying to do is to solve the problems of slum dwellers. And the message over here that they're conveying is that you don't solve the problems of poverty through charity. By giving money away for free, you create a dependence, you don't solve problems. You solve the problems by teaching people how to fish. You solve the problems by building people's self-confidence up, by giving them the skills to now get out of it. You solve the problems through innovation. They're doing a lot of great things. So what they did was that, I don't know how both of you got together, how Julian and Alfredo got together, but Alfredo had been developing technologies in the petroleum industry to do with the viscosity of petroleum. And he wanted to get clean water for the slums, because in the slums you have dirty water. They don't have the same privileges that you folks living in fancy houses have. You don't have water in the slums. So they basically have to buy bottled water, which costs 10 times as much as what you pay for tap water or more. So he asked if he could develop a solution for water. Within 18 months, I think I'll give him a 90% chance of developing a technology that can solve the grand challenge of humanity of fixing the water problem. Right now he can take dirty water and turn it into bacteria-free water. If he can remove the arsenic and the chemicals from it, now you have solved the grand challenges all here in Chile. His solution is cheap. By the time he's done, I suspect it'll cost less than $50 to have a purification machine that can work for a village by the time it's done in volume. If he doesn't succeed, then you have Dean Kamen, who's developing a device called the Slingshot, which is a bigger device, costlier device, but which will also process water, so it takes the dirtiest water and to develop clean water. There are a number of people developing solutions for water. There are a number of people developing solutions for energy. Solar power, the price of solar power is dropping. In India, for example, electricity is very unreliable. It keeps going down, so all the big businesses have have diesel generators. Very costly, very environmentally unfriendly. As of about a few weeks ago, the price of solar dropped 30% over there. So today, solar cells are cheaper than diesel is in India. So in the next 1 or 2 years, you'll probably see the backups being done by solar versus diesel, which is going to be an amazing advance forward for India. But move forward 3 or 4 years. If solar keeps dropping the way it is, within the next 5 or 10 years, 5 or 7 years possibly, solar will be cheaper than regular electricity. So now you'll have solar all over the place in India. And look at Chile. Look at the Atacama Desert. It's a bounty. It's the Amazon desert for solar. You can now start having solar cells all over the desert and supply enough electricity for the whole of South America. So all of these advances are happening. But you know something? The message over here is that the people who are going to solve these problems aren't governments. Governments have been trying to solve the problem that he's solving. In 18 months, he did what no government could do. He developed a water purification system that can be built inexpensively, that can change the world. There are other entrepreneurs in Chile who are developing equally significant products. There are entrepreneurs all over the world. Now that I'm part of Singularity University, as I travel the world and meet entrepreneurs, I'm blown away with all the advances that are happening. But they're small teams. He'll tell you about his own company, but it's a small team of people that's building this amazing technology. Today, you folks have access to the same knowledge that the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley have. Think about it. You have laptops, you have smartphones, you have access to the internet. If there's an earthquake in Japan, you know about it as fast as the US president does. If there's a new technology developed in Brazil, you can go to Brazil's top tech sites and read about it before anyone else does. In fact, the Americans won't even know where to look. All they do is read the stupid tech blogs in Silicon Valley. They don't read the global tech blogs. You have access to a broader set of information because you're here in Santiago. Singularity University, you'll be able to go to a website later this year and download many of our lectures. We'll make a lot of our content available for free or for very small fee. So the same knowledge that the brightest scientists and engineers in America have, you have available to you over here. A child today living in the slums of Valparaiso has access to as much knowledge and faster access to knowledge than President Clinton did when he was in power. Think about it. On a little cell phone connected via a data plan or a Wi-Fi, you have access to the world's knowledge, unfiltered. You can get access to what's happening in the Middle East. You can watch TV stations in China. You can see what's happening all over the world. So all of you in this room have access to the same knowledge that anyone else in the world does. There's nothing stopping you. All of you in this room now are empowered to solve the grand challenges. Building solutions is no longer expensive. It's very cheap now to build solutions. So you can change the world. That's the magic of where you are today.